Hello and welcome back. This is Sherry with Heart and Soulful back in the studio today, working on a couple of new journals. So if you watched the video series that I just finished with Melane's journal, I did her journal using a kettle stitch, and I used a bunch of my handmade papers that are kind of grungy, different techniques. I will put a link down in the description for the videos playlist that I do different techniques. Some of them are bubble papers, some of them are just grungy coffee stain papers, different things. So there's an entire playlist. I am hoping to make some more papers soon, and when I do, I will record that in case I come up with some new techniques. In the meantime, I really enjoyed digging through those papers and decided I would create a couple of journals just with my handmade papers. No book page, no other digitals, nothing like that. These are all just the original, so they have lots of texture to them. So I wanted to show you kind of where I started off camera, and then I will do one just the same completely on camera so that you can follow along if you want to do something like this. So the first thing you need to do is, once you've made your papers, is find a book cover, an old book cover, and it doesn't matter if it has a spine or not. You can use it either way. I'm going to actually show you the other one. I'm going to leave a spine on, I think. I always like seeing the pages, but I really kind of like how grungy the spine is. So I have this old book cover, and I cleaned it a little bit because it was grungy, but not in an even kind of way. So I just used a baby wipe to kind of clean it a little bit. And it still is grungy, but it's kind of more even. And then you can see kind of the splatters. That's just, I sprayed a little bit of coffee water mixture on there just to give it some splatters. And so I could do more to it, but I think I'm just gonna leave it like that because this whole journal is gonna be, not created in yet. And so you can work on the cover as well as the inside. So I stitched them together using a kettle stitch. And then for this one, I decided some of the spines of the folios are more fragile because of the techniques and what you introduce to the paper. Sometimes you get a little cracking. Some of them I did go ahead and reinforce those if they were really going to tear. But I decided, like this one, you can't really see, I tried to do things that would blend in or at least look good with the paper. So only a few of them have some reinforcement. So I did the kettle stitch, and then I thought I just have these strings. I could put tabs, which I think is what I'm going to do on this one. I've done that before. That's how I did Melane's journal, with just some lace as tabs. But on this one, I left the string thinking I could glue that down. But I wasn't really sure how sturdy this first page is. And I kind of felt like I really wanted a little bit more reinforcement to the spine before I glued it into the book. So I will do this on camera when I do go ahead and glue it. But I decided to put an entire piece of scrim, and I'll put a link down below. This is just a gauzy fabric. And I like to use it a lot. It's you can tear the edges and then they're frayed, and I just like the look of it. So I glued this with my pH neutral book adhesive. It's just a PVA glue. So you can use any kind of PVA glue that you have. And I just brushed it on with a silicone brush, which is, you can use a paintbrush, but I just used this little one. And just put a nice coat of that over, and then put the fabric on and let it dry. Now, the one thing that if you're going to do a whole piece like this, and maybe I'll do one on camera in the future, but if you're going to do a whole piece like that, each of these is a folio. So it's not like you made a big signature. They're stitched together individually. So you have a gap. This is where the threads are. Then I have a gap. This is where my center of my folio, and a gap. You kind of, as this is drying, you have to kind of be careful and make sure that there's no glue in between that's kind of sticking these together. So after, I'll kind of flip through this. After I had let it dry overnight, I had to come back and kind of gently encourage these pages to lay open flat. So it may have made some of the more fragile ones a little fragile, but that can be fixed when you go and actually work in these. You can add washi tape and do repairs and things like that then. But I really like how it came out, just with so many different colorful and neutral and just all grungy papers. So I think I'm gonna really enjoy this book. So it's just an entire journal. This one's 25 folios, so you get a lot of workspace. So I think what's gonna happen is I'm gonna end up gluing this down, gluing these threads down, and gluing that first page down, and that's what's gonna hold it to my cover. So I will do that on camera, but I wanted to kind of start at the beginning if you're wanting to do one from scratch. So I have another set of 25 folios, and I found a book cover that was close enough size. It's really old. It's from copyright 1881, but the spine is still there, but not, you know, in great shape. So if I do this one the same way with a kettle stitch and use that first page of my folio to glue that down, then it'll all stay in as kind of a floating spine sort of deal, so that this really doesn't do anything. It's just there. But I think I'll like how that looks, and you can kind of see my folios through that. So that's kind of my plan for this one. So I did have to trim these down just a tiny bit. They were fine, the width, but they were 8.5, and I had to trim them down to 8. So that's a nice size. So that's what I'm going to do for this one. I could, if I want to, because this cover, and maybe I will after the fact, this cover has a rounded edge. So I may take my corner punch and punch all these pages and make them rounded corners too. They don't really have to be because they kind of fit within, but if I wanted to, I could do that. So I think I'm going to leave it like it is, though. To decide on my page size, I just measure the paper that's already there. I've also gone over this before. If this paper, when we go to glue this in, this paper is going to be introduced to liquid, so it's going to probably try to pull away. So you may want to try to pull off as much of this paper as you can to start, or we'll have to go back and make some repair here along this edge, and we won't really be able to do that if we left the spine in. So I would recommend trying to get this paper off before we go to try to glue this down. Otherwise it may just pull it apart. So we'll get to that when we get to that part. So to start with, I've done this in another video, but someone asked if I would do the whole thing on camera, and I think that's super tedious and boring, but I will start this and I will try to record the whole thing. I'm gonna have to do it in parts because I can't do this in one sitting, but I'll just do it on a fast forward-ish, and then you can just, you know, speed through that if you don't want to watch it. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you what I've done to this point just to save time. You want to grab something that you can punch into. So I use this. It's just a recycled piece of material. You can fold up some towels. You can stack some cardboard or something like that, just so you don't poke through to your table. So you need something soft. You need an awl or some sort of pokey tool with a sharp end. You might want a ruler if you want to measure your holes. And I don't even use a pencil. What I did was I did my little folded piece of cardstock so that I can have it for later. If I have pages the same size, and I would already have one made. And then I just measured, and this is 8 inches. So you can do your holes closer together, farther apart, whatever you want to do. I like to stitch these into, instead of doing the whole book at once where you have a really long piece of thread, I work on one set, the next set, and the next set. So I like to do 2 holes. I have done them with 3. That takes a little more time and is a little more complicated. This is easier, and it's plenty sturdy. So I kind of measure a 1/2 inch from either end, and then 1 inch in from there. So these are 1 inch apart. And then I find the center and go a 1/2 inch out on either side, and then those are 1 inch apart. So you don't have to measure, you can eyeball it if you want. But once you have a pattern, then you would take each of your folios and just lay them inside. Make sure you have the fold at the fold, and then you're just gonna punch those holes. So I've already done that just to save time. So I have all of my holes ready to go. And It's a good idea on your pattern if you maybe put a T at the top so that in case you get interrupted, you don't accidentally have it flipped, because they're not going to be exact. But you can kind of see where I have all my holes already made there. And I have gone ahead and reinforced ones that I knew were pretty fragile. I may have some more in here, like I said, but I'm gonna hope for the best. So this is my front. I'm gonna start at the back, and I need a length of thread. So I know I have 25 inches plus a little knot that I'm gonna make. So you want to, give yourself enough thread. So in this case, I maybe do like 36 inches or something like that. So I'm not even gonna really measure. For this one, I'm actually gonna use, I got myself some binding thread that's waxed, that's not white. So this is actually feels to me really nice. It's almost like it's braided, and I will try to find where I purchased this and put a link down below. But I really like how waxed it is, and I like the color once it's stitched in. It's not that bright white. So I'm gonna get a length of this. I'd rather have too much than not enough. And then I'm gonna use my curved needle. And this, you'll see if you haven't tried this type of binding, you'll see why the curved needle is very handy. You can do it with a straight one, but it would take a lot longer because of the way we have to go under a loop. So I'm just gonna start at one end. If I get in here close enough. And I'm just gonna go from the outside through the first hole. And you just want to be really careful not to put stress on your paper because you'll end up tearing in between, and then it's not going to come out nice. So I'm going to come up through the next hole, and we're just going to work back and forth on this set through the whole book block. So I have that line there, and now I'm going to close that up, and I'm going to go to the next folio, find my opening, and I'm going to go in again through the top of the next one. I've already kind of looped my thread there. So that thread just goes from here to here. So that you can kind of hold it and get it nice and tight. You're going to go up the next hole. And now I can grab these two and kind of make sure they're tight. And then I want to tie a double knot in this end to get myself started here. And then I'm going to leave that tail on for now. And now I can grab my next folio. And I'm going to go in through the bottom hole. And here I can get those snug to each other and go up the next hole. And then this is where you want to be kind of careful so that you don't tear anything. So I'm able to kind of tug it a little bit this way. If I were to go this way, I would tear in between there. So make sure you're paying attention to the direction that you're kind of tugging. You just want to make that as tight as you can without tearing anything. And then I'm going to hold my thread over to the left. And I'm going to use this curve of this needle, and I'm going to go in between the two before, because I have that thread that goes across, remember? So I'm going to go through there and come up, and I have this thread to the left. So if I pull on that, and it kind of, it helps if you squeeze your fingers here so you're not going to tear any paper, and you can pull that knot tight without tearing anything. So now I've made a little knot that connected these, and you're just going to continue on. I'm going to add the next one in. Just have everything lined up with your hand there, and I'm going to go through the top again. And I can pull those snug. I'm not going to tear anything. And then I can come up the other hole. So it helps if you kind of then pull this and then pull this through. And again, if I were to pull it this way, I'm going to tear between. So I can maybe tug a little bit, but not too much, because I might go this way and tear it. So again, I'm going to put this thread over to the left, use my curve, and I'm going to go between the two before and inside, keeping that on the left. And again, that is going to make that little knot. I'm going to get my thread out of the way. And then hold these with your fingers, and you can pull that without tearing anything. And you see how nice and even that is. So you just take your time. It's tedious, like I said. It takes time because you want to make sure everything's lined up and that you don't accidentally tear anything. So I'm going to go back through the top. Make that tight. If I pull it through from the inside, I'm not going to tear anything, okay? Hold that and then pull through here. Again, pull away so I don't tear anything. Keep it to the left. Go in between the two previous pages and come up with my thread on the outside, and I'll create that little knot. Doing this with waxed thread versus embroidery thread or something like that is a lot easier because it just helps it to glide. But you can wax your embroidery thread if you just have one of those little wax wheels. I've shown those before. I'll put its little thing like this that seamstresses use, and it just helps your thread to glide. So you can use that and wax thread if you don't have waxed thread. But if you do a lot of these, you'll find a thread like this one that I like, and you'll want to buy a whole spool of it, because if you do a lot of them, you kind of end up finding what your favorite thing is. So I'm gonna go in now to the bottom one, and I'm gonna hold them tight and pull from this side so I don't tear anything. And again, pull away to the left, in between the two previous ones, and make sure this thread is to the back. You know, having this little tail is kind of in my way. Hold those together, and you create that little knot. Okay, I want to show you this. If you'll see, I started to kind of tear this one. So I'm going to go back and show you how you can fix something like that. So I'm just going to reverse thread this one. Will be the easiest way than trying to fix it while I have it half sewn in. So I'm just going to go back through that, back through this hole. And there I am. So I'm going to take this one off and repair that little tear. So I'm going to repair this one. If you wanted to do a spread, I prefer, unless you're going to repair them on both sides, to repair them on the outside. So I'm going to grab something, I think because this is black and white, it would look okay to use this book page, dictionary page strip that I have already cut. You can use washi tape or anything that you might have, realizing that it's going to be visible and a part of your final design. And then I'm just going to use my Yoo-Hoo glue stick and repair that quickly here. And I don't even know if I have it straight. I'm not really going to be too concerned about it. And now I need to repunch my holes, but very carefully, so I can kind of feel where they were. That one's a little harder to feel, but I can kind of see it there. And now I can go back and try to put it back into my book. And try to be more careful this time. And then this is my last folio for this bottom row. Okay, so to finish that off, I did my little knot, but I'm gonna go between the last two and do another little knot. And I could make this a double knot or just leave it there. And then cut that. So now I have my first set finished. And you can see, rather than trying to do the whole thing, I didn't have to have this thread be so long that it was hard to work with. So now I can work on these two next. So I'm going to do another thread, and you can see I did pretty good at guessing, because you like to have a little bit for your needle. So I'm going to do it a similar length. And then I'm going to start the next row the same way. So I'm going to come in from the top. And this is easier in some ways because you have it all sewn together. Leaving a little tail, and then I'm going to come up through the other side. And I have to be careful at this point because I don't have a knot tied yet. So I'm going to go into my second folio and go straight across. And then up through the other side. So again, I want to be careful not to tear my paper, but now I can kind of pull these tight and make a double knot again. And then I'm going to grab my third folio. So I'm just working like this with my finger into the next one. And then it's easier if you lay your book down and open it up to the page. Pull that kind of tight and find the next hole. And then here I want to be careful again. I can pull that one because there's a knot there, but I want to be careful coming up the other side and not pull it too tight. And then I'm going to find that thread that goes across this way in between the first two. And again, make sure this thread was to the left, which I didn't do a very good job of on camera, so that I can pull that through as a knot. And this is nice. Your book will kind of stand on its own then. And again, I'm on the last folio. So I'm going to do the same thing and just go in. Tie my knot and then go through again. And tie another knot. And I was really close on that one. I almost didn't get my thread long enough. It would have been better to have it a little longer. And now I'm just going to go to the last row and do the same thing. So I'm just going to cut another length of thread, hopefully a little longer this time. And we'll get started on the third row. Just the same as the first two. I'm going to start here on the bottom. And as you can see, it gets much easier the farther along you get in getting the book made together. So I'm just gonna pull that up and then go into the second folio. And up through the top. That's simple. And then I'm going to tie my double knot. And then we go into the third folio, straight across. Up the other side. And then I'm going to go put the thread to the left, go in between the first two, hold that tight, and pull through and make my knot, and go to the next one. Straight across. once again, I'm in my last folio. And I'm going to go into between the two before. And then I'm going to go back in again in between that one and the previous one, the last one and the next to last one, and make another knot. And that is it, folks. I have my book block finished, and you can see even without a cover, you can use this. You do get that gap in between each folio, but as you go through, everything lays nice and flat while you work on it. You can see when I put these together, these are two different folios. I try to have it, you know, obviously this is one piece of paper, but I try to make the next one kind of go as seamlessly as possible so that you can make a spread or two spreads that look good together. So that takes a little bit of thought, but otherwise I love these two. They have a lot of texture. And this one has little beautiful blue undertones. I'm excited now about being able to make some more papers and some different types of papers. So I hope to be trying some new experiments, revisiting some of these old techniques, and creating a nice variety of papers for some more journals. So that is sewing in a book block using a kettle stitch. So the next thing I want to do is get it into a cover. And I'm going to do this one, I think, I'll do one without the spine, and this one I'll do with the spine. And that way you can kind of see the difference. So for either one of these, I can go and just glue that in. In the other one, I'll pull it out again. In the other one, I had put the piece of scrim and glued it to the back. I think for this one, I'm going to not do that because I have the spine. But I think I will go ahead and put some fabric just so I have some bigger tabs than just these to lay down. It'll just give it that little extra bit of strength, and then I'll glue these down. So I'm going to get some fabric I think I'll just do 3 strips instead of 6 strips, just do 3, and then put that down that way. So I'm going to grab some fabric. You can use anything for this, but I think for strength, and this is about the right size, I'm just going to cut some strips from this scrap of just some cotton fabric. So I can make them, let's see, I need to make them the width of that. So that one, I'm just going to kind of eyeball these. And I've done this in other videos where I use my rested fabric or something like that if it's going to show. And that way you can kind of make it decorative if you want. So I'm just going to use my silicone spreader and some of my PVA neutral pH bookbinding glue. And my thing is a little clogged, so I'm just pouring it right onto my spreader. And then I just want to put it here on the spine. These I could probably cut off, but I think I'll just glue them in. Okay, so I'm gonna leave these to dry for just a few minutes and work on the other cover, just so I can let that dry, and we'll come back to that one. So the previous one that I had already done the book block, if you watched from the beginning, I glued a whole entire piece of this gauzy scrim to the back, and you have to be careful. Oh, I should check this other one before I let it dry too much. One thing you want to do is, there may be glue had seeped through here, and then those will kind of want to stick together. So maybe just go through each of these and kind of make sure that there's not wet glue in between, so those won't stick together. So I'm just going to quickly go through each of these. Okay, hopefully none of those will stick together, and we'll let that dry a little bit longer. Okay, so for this one, I'm ready to go ahead and glue this on. So I need to glue the fabric first, and I think I'm gonna want more than just that. So I'm gonna end up gluing this first page down. Now there's different ways to do this part. So you just use your imagination, and it depends on what you want to see on your spine. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of different ways that I've done these. This one, I glued a piece of fabric that goes this entire length. I don't know if you can see. I wanted to see part of my folios. So I have a piece of fabric, instead of going the whole length, it just goes this far. And then this is just decorative on the top of that. So this piece of fabric was glued on just like this one was, and just like the tabs were on the other one. And I wanted to go ahead and see the grungy cover that was already there. But you can see I've torn off some of the paper on the edge. What happens is, when you have a cover that has a paper on it, once you get this wet with glue to add whatever you're adding, it might pull away from this. And so you want to make sure that this is glued again, if you need to that cover. Because I'm going to be covering this whole thing, I'm not going to see any of this. I want to maybe take as much of this off as I can. I kind of like seeing that, but I want to get some of this layer that might want to peel off anyway, because it's not going to show. So you kind of just have to look at each individual book and just remove what might want to come off once it gets wet with glue. So I'm going to do that to this one, just because I don't want anything to pull away. In the end, when all this dries, it is really sturdy, and I'll show you on the other ones that I've done, but I'm going to just kind of clean those up a little bit. Okay, so I want to do that on the back also. So that's how I did this one. I left the grunginess, and just this piece of fabric is what's holding this cover on. I didn't even go and glue this first page down. So that's one way. And then this is the most recent one I did, where I did just the tabs with lace. And then I glued those lace tabs down. And then I glued the first page, which happened to be this tracing paper with the cheesecloth on it. So I glued those down. So in addition to the lace tabs holding it to the cover, the first folio, half of it is glued down. That's what I'm going to do on this one. And then a third way is, you can do it this way, where there's another piece of fabric in here, you just can't see it. This one was stitched in a different way. But when I stitched it in, I had this piece of fabric that's, this wide, attached to the book block. In this case, it was sewn together that way because it was done with the pamphlet stitch, but it's a similar concept to having glued this fabric on. So in this one, the folios were actually stitched to the fabric. This way it's glued on, but you end up with the same thing. You end up with a piece of fabric glued to your spine. So in this case, my piece of fabric that was glued to my spine was this wide. So that's what you see, my rusty fabric. So when the book was put together, it was a spineless book, and that was glued in. And then I just put a piece of music page. I didn't cover this piece of fabric because I wanted to see it. So I just cut it a little short and glued it in to cover whatever was under here. So you can do that. And then in this case, I also added a piece of fabric to the outside to create a decorative spine cover. So this was also a spineless book. So there's different ways. You just kind of have to think about how you're going to put it together so it stays together. So I've cleaned that side. I'm going to try to get rid of some of this. It's really a shame because I like that old handwriting there. So maybe I just see what wants to come off. And not much, but what happens is when this gets wet, it might want to. I'm going to go ahead and leave it, and if it pulls away a little bit, I don't think I'm going to have to worry about it because I am going to be putting that entire, I'm going to put this and this on there. So I'm going to go ahead and put some glue on this side, and we'll do this side first. And I'm just, again, using the same PVA bookbinding glue, and I've got some gunky on my silicone spreader. Okay, so I'm just gonna take my book block and hopefully get it lined up. And let's see, where's my... You can use a credit card or something like that. I have a little thread here, but it's going to get covered. So you can take an old credit card or something and just make sure that's smoothed out. And then I want to check it before it's really dry. And that looks, let's see, pretty even to me. And I like how I can kind of see this little frayed edge around. So that's down. And I think even though this is still wet, I'm gonna go ahead and put this other piece down because I think it'll make my whole deal more sturdy before I do the other side. And that is lined up pretty good. So I'm gonna go ahead now, and I think I'm gonna leave these just because it's added security there. And I don't think you'll, even though they're a string, I might feel that little bit of a bump, but I think because this paper's so thick that I don't really think I'm gonna notice it. Now I do want to make sure I have that little bit of gap. Okay, so I want to glue up this. Okay, a nice, even, heavy coat. So I have a little glue that is beyond this paper. So I want to kind of let this dry before I lay anything down. I don't want anything else to stick to that. So I'm gonna grab myself here a little cleanup. And then I want to use something that won't stick. So I'm gonna grab one of my handy sheets that I have. This is just recycled sticker backing, so it's It's non-stick. And then I'm going to put another book here and my weights on this and let this dry before I do the other side. So I'm just going to let it dry for a little while. I'll work on the other one. This is kind of why it's nice to be working on two journals at the same time, so you can let things dry. So I'm gonna move this and put some weight on it. And this one's going to be really easy because I just have these tabs, but you can see they're pretty well attached. Maybe not the best, but I'm gonna be gluing this down also. So I'm gonna make sure my book block just fits in that. So for this, I'm gonna start with just gluing these tabs down and these threads. And when I'm pushing this card in, I'm feeling for that gap, that little gap that you kind of want there. So I have my front cover, and then I'm just going to do the same thing to the back side. But you can see just the wetness in this old book. I need to lay this flat and put some weight on it to dry. So I'm going to go ahead and weight this one down and see if the other one's dry enough for me to put the back cover on. I like to put a book right up against this so that it doesn't put any pressure. So you want to have weight all the way and then weight on the other side, even if you haven't glued it on, just so it doesn't put pressure on the spine. So this one does need to dry longer. So I think I'm going to go ahead and let it dry more, and then we'll come back and work on the other side. Okay, so it's been a couple of hours. I actually went ahead and did the other side off camera because it was done exactly the same way, and this video was getting rather long. So they do need to dry overnight. I do still feel some dampness, so I'm not going to do a flip through right now, but I have put both the front and back cover on it. So I want to leave these overnight to dry, and then I'll do a flip through and we'll take a look at what we have. This one, I also put the back cover on. It also needs to dry. I did also add some glue. This was all loose, and so it was just going to end up tearing, I think. I liked it loose, but it wasn't going to be very durable. So I went ahead and just added some of the bookbinding glue just to stick down these bits of the spine. But I still like it. It still looks very grungy. So I'm going to go ahead and put these back under weight and let them dry. And then tomorrow we are going to do a flip through of these. I'll decide about putting them in my Etsy shop in case anybody is interested in these, or one of them. I may have to keep one. I have already started working on some other papers, though. They're drying as we speak. So I'm going to work on more because I do really like how they turned out. I just think they'll be a lot of fun to work in. So that's going to be it for today. Have a great rest of your day. Now go make something. Bye.